Just to let everybody know, our witness is tied up in traffic with a motorcade, so he will be here as post haste. The subcommittee will come to order, and the chair recognizes himself for an opening statement. And good morning and welcome back to the subcommittee, Assistant Secretary Davidson. Thank you for appearing before us today, and we look forward to today's discussion. Today, members of this committee expect an update on America's largest investment to bridge the digital divide, the BEAD program. This $42.45 billion fund is statutorily obligated to connect unserved and underserved Americans to reliable broadband internet so that they are able to reap the benefits that come with connectivity. Since we last spoke, states submitted their initial proposals for this funding. Louisiana, the first state to submit their Volume 2 application, celebrated the approval of their initial proposal on December the 15th, 2023. Now, over 4 months later, NTI has only approved the Volume 2 application for 3 additional states, Kansas, Nevada, and West Virginia. I hope that NTI will not miss the statutory timeline for this program. It's essential for you to work diligently to keep the program on track to close the digital divide. While it is important to have reasonable processing timelines for this program, ensuring that BEAD is a program that broadband providers will be willing to participate in is also essential. In February, the Department of Commerce Office of Inspector General echoed the sentiment the Republicans have stated since the passage of the infrastructure law. The BEAD program must be technologically neutral to fit the broadband needs of the different states and territories. The OIG warned that NTI must relax the fiber preference and extremely high-cost threshold to take into consideration the limited availability of resources to support a fiber preference. Ignoring innovations in unlicensed fixed wireless and satellite technologies will make the BEAD program a deploy as much fiber as possible program instead of Connect Every American program that Congress directed. In addition, members of this committee have expressed concern about NTIA forcing states to regulate broadband rates, imposing burdensome labor requirements, and ignoring other congressional directives. Now that OIG has confirmed our earlier fears, we hope you will finally listen to other concerns we have raised. I expect we will hear today from the Assistant Secretary and my Democrat colleagues about the need to provide funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP. I would just note that the Senate is controlled by the Democrats and has yet to send a solution to the House. We have also not been asked to work on reforms to the program that would earn our support to fund. However, I am actively participating in bipartisan bicameral USF working group, which is working on a long-term sustainable solution to ensuring that the Affordable Connectivity Program is sustainable long-term, and I would encourage all my colleagues to support that effort. Broadband is only one facet of our conversation today. NTIA's work spans from leading the executive branch in studies on federal spectrum use, reports on artificial intelligence and quantum computing, to spurring innovation in public safety and open radio access networks. As NTIA's mission continues to expand, it is important Congress's intent for the agency remains clear. Reauthorizing the NTIA is still a top priority for this committee, and I look forward to my bill with the ranking member of the subcommittee being considered by the full House this week that will do just that. It has now been over 30 years since the NTIA was last reauthorized. It is our duty to provide direction to the executive branch agencies within our jurisdiction, and this committee takes that role seriously. We must move H.R. 4510, the NTIA Reauthorization Act, through the Senate and to the President's desk. Now, I must note I was disappointed following our December oversight hearing that we did not receive answers in the 30 days we requested on additional questions that were sent to NTIA. Instead, got a response months later on April the 19th. This delay is not acceptable. As members of Congress and your Oversight Committee, you have a responsibility to respond to inquiries in a timely manner. Following this hearing, we expect prompt responses to our questions. That will conclude my opening statement, and I now will recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentlelady from California's 7th District, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking Assistant Secretary, NTI Administrator Davidson for testifying today before us and whose leadership has been instrumental in guiding our nation's telecommunications policy. As innovation speeds up, NTI's role as the agency responsible by law for advising the President on telecommunications and information policy has never been more important. From spectrum and internet governance to overseeing the deployment of AI systems, NTIA is making decisions now with far-reaching consequences. Despite this, NTIA has not been reauthorized for more than 30 years. Thankfully, today, the House will be voting on the NTIA Reauthorization Act, which Chairman Lada and I lead. This crucial bill will help the agency better execute its vital federal mission. Perhaps no part of that mission is more important than ensuring the continuous success of the BEAD program. Born of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, BEAD represents our best shot at ensuring every American has access to affordable, reliable, and high-speed internet. But it's important to remember that BEAD is more than just a broadband deployment program. It's a program designed to close the digital divide. To that end, it's not enough to simply build broadband in every neighborhood or hamlet in the country. We must make sure that broadband is affordable and accessible to all. Thankfully, the statute that created BEAD ensured that affordability was a foundational component of this program. By requiring state plans to include a low-cost option, the statute acknowledges that deployment is only one facet of a holistic effort to close the digital divide. That's why Ranking Member Pallone and I sent a letter to NTIA, signed by every Democrat on the subcommittee, urging NTIA to continue prioritizing affordability as it reviews state plans. Doing so isn't just good for American consumers. It ensures that ISPs have a reliable customer base as they deploy in previously or underserved areas. My district stretches from the urban core of Sacramento all the way down to the Delta, including small agricultural towns and farming communities. And whether I'm in downtown Sacramento or small hamlets, I hear about broadband affordability. The high cost of broadband isn't an urban or rural issue. It affects all Americans. That's why I'm so glad to see NTIA taking it head on. NTIA's crucial affordability work has only been made more urgent with a looming lapse in ACP funding. With 23 million American households relying upon ACP to help make ends meet, a loss of this program could be a devastating blow to connectivity. Democrats have been laser-focused on keeping this program alive. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will finally come to the table to talk about sustaining this vital program. But to close the digital divide and fuel the innovation America needs to lead, we must also focus on NTIA's statutory role as manager of the federal government's use of spectrum. Taken together, the National Spectrum Strategy and Presidential Memorandum on Spectrum offer a roadmap for sustained American leadership. That means empowering NTIA to speak on behalf of the federal government and setting aggressive timelines for studies of the bands identified. But all of us will need to stay engaged with this process to ensure we meet our goals. That's why I sent a letter with Chairman Lada requesting an update on how they will be proceeding in the critical study of the lower 3 gigahertz band. For this and any other bands identified in the National Spectrum Strategy, it's vital that the parameters and methodologies for these studies are driven by engineering and science. I'm committed to continuing my work with the chairman to ensure our subcommittee provides the necessary oversight to make sure that happens. But there is more I'm hoping to cover today, from Open RAN to AI governance, and I'm excited to get going. So I want to thank again Mr. Davidson for appearing before us today. And with that, I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and just to let everyone know, the chair and the ranking member are downstairs in another subcommittee right now. They'll be coming up post-haste. But just 2 quick notes. By agreement, Mr. Davidson's asked for about a 10-minute recess at about 11:45, and so we'll take a brief 10-minute recess at that time. And also, if the subcommittee is still running when votes are called at 1:30, we'll come back after 10 minutes after the second or the last vote is called, not when the vote completes, but when the last vote's called. So we'll continue at that time. So we'll just we'll stand down just for a minute or two until the chair of the full committee can be here. Thank you. And right on time.
Thank you, Chairman Latta.
Well, and the chair recognizes the gentlelady, the full committee chair from the state of Washington, for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back, Administrator Davidson. The National Telecommunications and Information Agency, NTIA, is responsible for managing federal spectrum use and awarding funds to deploy broadband. In December, following the last NTIA oversight hearing, Chair Latta and I sent a letter regarding your prior testimony suggesting that NTIA was allowing and even encouraging rate regulation by states participating in the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD, program. In your response, you stated that NTIA will consider any definition proposed by an eligible entity, provided that it meets the standards laid out in the BEAD statute. We agree that NTIA is bound to that statute when implementing the BEAD program. And the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act explicitly states that NTIA is not authorized to regulate rates charged for broadband services. Yet, we continue to hear from states that NTIA is pushing them to include rate-regulated options in their initial proposals for BEAD funding, which completely violates the intent of the law. Because of NTIA's decision, some states have said that additional federal funding will be needed. They veered away from the technology-neutral principles mandated by law, and even sought to engage in rate regulation of broadband service despite them knowing that this will fail to connect all Americans. Many of these proposals jeopardize the success of the BEAD program and hinder the program's mission to connect as many Americans as possible. While this program is distributed by the federal government and state broadband offices, it will be the participating providers, both big and small, that will ultimately determine the BEAD program's success. It's vital that NTIA follows congressional direction, administers this program to the letter of the law, and rejects state plans that stray from these goals, regardless of political leaning and leadership. I'm encouraged that NTIA is working with agencies to streamline the permitting process for BEAD recipients, with billions of dollars made available for broadband deployment. Interagency coordination on all levels is key to ensuring this money is not wasted and efforts are not duplicated. But I caution the agency against creating a permitting regime that only benefits government-funded projects, which will further discourage investment and widen the digital divide. This committee has taken decisive action to roll back similar permitting requirements for all broadband projects. H.R. 3557, the American Broadband Deployment Act, would allow all broadband infrastructure to benefit from the same categorical exclusions that BEAD recipients will enjoy. I hope NTIA and the Biden administration will support that bill and work with us to get it signed into law. Another shared priority is making spectrum available for commercial use, which is essential to maintain American leadership in next-generation wireless technology. In March, the NTIA released its National Spectrum Strategy Implementation Plan. This plan provides a roadmap for ensuring America is leading in spectrum, including timelines for spectrum studies, and I commend NTIA for its transparency in this process thus far. As the manager of federal government spectrum, I hope NTIA is collaborating with other relevant agencies to push for the most efficient use of spectrum and to identify spectrum that can be made available for commercial use. Finally, I'm sure that we'll be hearing about the Affordability Connectivity Program today. There seems to be a lot of finger pointing. The Senate, which is controlled by the president's party, has not yet acted to fund this program or reached out to House Republicans to find a solution. I'll also note that as the funding cliff for this program approaches, we've seen a remarkable response from industry, offering low-cost options for broadband internet as low as $10 per month, well below ACP's $30 floor. We all share the goal of making sure Americans are connected. Hopefully, we can move beyond trying to score political points and work together to find a viable, long-term, fiscally responsible way to make it happen. Again, Administrator Davidson, thanks for being with us here today. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and my understanding is the ranking member of the full committee is on his way up, so we're just going to informally suspend for a minute or so. At this time, the chair will now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we conduct important oversight of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and it's important that we recognize the tremendous amount of work the agency is doing to connect all Americans to fast, reliable, and affordable Internet service. NTIA is implementing the game-changing policies that President Biden and congressional Democrats delivered as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law and its historic $42 billion investment in broadband infrastructure. And you can't streamline your way to universal Internet coverage. You have to make real investments and set the goal high, like this law does, and it will fund the infrastructure that will bring reliable Internet now and last for years to come, rather than settling for second-class speeds and technology that will only leave these communities behind again when the next technology comes along. But funding broadband infrastructure alone will not close the digital divide. For millions of Americans, the cost of Internet service is too high, and that's why we included an important broadband affordability provision in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It requires that providers who receive grant funds to build out this infrastructure must offer a low-cost option to certain households in the build-out areas. The statute allows states to determine what that low-cost figure will be. It also sets out a process for the NTIA to approve or disapprove of that number. Now, some Republican critics of this policy wrongly characterize it as a rate regulation, but I think that's misreading the statute. Republican opponents are simply working with the Internet providers to make monthly Internet costs higher for the very communities set to finally receive Internet service. And we should be doing all that we can to make Internet service more affordable for Americans, and that includes funding the Affordable Connectivity Program. This month, millions of Americans are seeing an increase on their Internet bill because the House Republican leadership does not extend or is not extending funding for the program. And this cannot continue. I urge my colleagues again to work with Democrats to get this done. And the NTIA is also hard at work implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law's digital equity program. This program will make sure everyone has the resources, skills, and devices to connect to the Internet and participate in our digital economy. And this is especially important given the broadband adoption barriers faced by communities like seniors and veterans who do not always have the resources to take full advantage of the opportunities that the digital economy offers. So all of the broadband programs in the bipartisan infrastructure law will strengthen our economy for the future, grow the middle class, and create good-paying American jobs. So NTIA also oversees federal spectrum users and coordinates with the FCC to ensure that our airways are effectively managed. And I remain extremely frustrated that Congress still has not been able to reauthorize the FCC Spectrum Auction Authority after its expiration in March of 2022. Chair Rogers and I have said for over a year that this reauthorization should not be delayed any further, and I'm concerned that this lapse will hinder us on the global stage, especially as we continue to compete with China in the development of advanced wireless technologies. So despite this lapse, President Biden has made great strides in modernizing our nation's spectrum policies. The President has reaffirmed the roles of NTIA and the FCC in managing the nation's spectrum resources. NTIA has built on these directives with a national spectrum strategy and an implementation plan, and these actions are an important first step in enhancing how we manage this critical natural resource to help strengthen America's technological leadership. So the NTIA has also had important responsibilities in public safety communications and examining emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and open radio access networks. And I look forward to the House passing the bipartisan NTIA reauthorization, I think later today, which touches on many of these issues. I also look forward to hearing more about these topics from Administrator Davidson today and thank him for being with us. And before I close, I just wanted to clarify one thing with the chair. The committee procedure for members' panels after last week's field hearing in Bakersfield on rural broadband. Madam Chair, despite what occurred at the field hearing, I wanted to confirm that it remains the practice of the committee not to ask questions of members of Congress who testify before the committee. I know this isn't a rule, but I think it's been comedy that we don't ask questions of members of Congress who testify before the committee. And I would just ask if you would respond to that, Madam Chair.
Yes, we will continue to follow the rules and practices of the committee.
Thank you so much, and I yield back the time.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. And this now concludes the member opening statements. The chair reminds members that pursuant to committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. We'd like to thank our witness, Administrator Davidson, for being here today to testify before the subcommittee. Our witness will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement, which will be followed by a round of questions from the members. And again, Administrator Davidson, again, we're glad you're here. And I also want to make a note for our witness that the timer light, I hope it's all working now because we had a little issue before you got here, that the timer light on the table will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining and will turn red when your time has expired. Administrator, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. Thanks again.
Chairman Latta, Chair Rogers, Ranking Member Matsui, Ranking Member Pallone, members of the subcommittee, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Since we last met in December, NTIA has made great strides in pursuit of the bipartisan initiatives that Congress has tasked to us. Today, I will focus on 3: connecting everyone in America to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet service, maintaining American leadership in wireless innovation, and developing policies that will make for a better internet. This week marks 2 years since NTIA launched the Internet for All initiative, and I continue to be moved by the personal stories I hear from people all across the country who do not have an internet connection. Just last week, I was in Georgia, and I met a retiree named Ernestine. She shared that until a year ago, she had never had internet service. She simply couldn't afford it. Then she heard about the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP. Now, Ernestine finally has home internet access. As she told us, once we had high-speed internet at home, we didn't have to rely on a ride to the public library to get online. A few months ago, Ernestine's husband, Bronson, was diagnosed with cancer. Suddenly, their internet connection became a literal lifeline, letting them consult with specialists without having to drive long distances. In Ernestine's words, having the internet at home transformed our lives in ways I never imagined. For Ernestine and millions of other people across the country like her, the need for connectivity is real and it is urgent. And I am proud to report that we are making great progress towards meeting that need. Through our grant programs, NTIA is already connecting people. We have deployed internet service to tens of thousands of homes, provided nearly 30,000 connected devices, trained more than 15,000 people. For our state grant program, 2024 is a year of execution, and states will soon begin selecting providers to build networks. For our broadband adoption program, we've launched more than $800 million in digital equity funding to deliver training and devices. And we're creating thousands of jobs through the President's Build America, Buy America program, which is bringing manufacturing back home to build the internet for all. Affordability remains a key goal in this initiative, and Congress has a key role to play in achieving it. Congress should act now to ensure that ACP, as many of you said, remains on firm financial footing for the 23 million households, like Ernestine's, who rely on it. Let me turn now to maintaining America's leadership in wireless. Last fall, we released the National Spectrum Strategy. Now we are executing on it, advancing work on the lower 3 gigahertz, 7 to 8 gigahertz, and 37 gigahertz bands, while coordinating with federal partners on spectrum sharing pilots. NTIA's lab in Boulder, ITS, will play a critical role in these and future spectrum studies. Here again, Congress has a key role to play. It is critical that Congress reestablish the FCC's auction authority and enact other reforms to enhance America's spectrum capabilities. We also just announced our second funding notice, over $400 million for the Wireless Innovation Fund, and the First Responder Network, now servicing over 5.5 million first responders, announced an $8 billion reinvestment just this winter to enhance communications for our public safety workers. Finally, NTIA is working domestically and globally to support an internet that is free and open, safe and secure. To highlight a few examples, I co-chair the President's Task Force on Kids Online Health and Safety, addressing a top concern of parents and caregivers nationwide. We're keenly focused on artificial intelligence, In March, NTIA released a report on making AI more accountable, and we are now studying the openness of advanced foundational AI systems. Again, this is an area where we need Congress. A comprehensive federal privacy law would greatly help in these and other policy areas. So I commend this committee for its leadership and commitment to protecting privacy. To close, given the importance of all these efforts, NTIA's work is about far more than technology policy. It's about building a more resilient, fair, and equitable society here at home. It's about competing better on the global stage, and it is about creating new jobs and economic opportunity for all Americans. Thank you. Thank you for your partnership and leadership, and I welcome your questions.
Well, thank you very much for your opening statement. And at this time, we will now begin questioning of our members, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Assistant Secretary, I'm seriously concerned about the negative impact the Federal Communications Commission's decision to reclassify broadband under Title II of the Communications Act will have on broadband industry. The data shows that under the light touch regulatory framework, broadband deployment has increased, speeds have increased, and rates have decreased. U.S. telecom networks thrived during the COVID-19 pandemic when nearly all Americans moved online overnight. You are now administering a $42 billion broadband grant program. The NTIA, under your direction, filed in support of the FCC reinstating strong net neutrality rules. What data did you use for your analysis to determine that this is necessary?
First of all, I'll just say that, first of all, thank you for the question. Also, thank you for your leadership and your courtesies in arranging for this hearing. Much appreciated. On this question, I'll just note that NTIA serves as the administration's voice with the Federal Communications Commission. We filed on behalf of the administration in the proceeding that you mentioned. And the administration, this administration has made no secret that it is a strong supporter of the open internet rules. The record that has been established by the FCC, we believe, strongly shows the need for consumer protections for a free and open internet, for an open internet. And, we also believe that the FCC had put together a compelling record that shows the national security needs that compelled its action.
Let me follow up on that, on the national security, because under your filing, you support that so that the FCC has the authority to act when needed to protect national security. But your filing also states that the FCC must take a collaborative and carefully calibrated approach to these security challenges. What specific national security expertise does the FCC have that the other agencies can't handle?
I think when it comes to telecommunications networks, the FCC has taken important action, for example, to make sure that Chinese telecommunications providers can offer service here in the United States, and they have a good deal of competency in that. There's an analog in the broadband space, and I think that is very much what the FCC indicated in its record that it wants to address, and that's where we believe they will have the greatest need for this authority. And as we noted, and as you rightly, I think, indicated, there are other agencies that have a lot of expertise in other areas around cybersecurity, and that's why we think it's important for the FCC to continue also to defer to that expertise in other places.
Okay, when you say to defer to these other agencies and departments out there, could you just name a few of them by chance?
Well, I think the Department of Homeland Security is a great example. NTIA has its own competencies. There's offices within the White House that have a great deal of competency. The Justice Department's another one, and our intelligence community. Okay,
well, thank you. I understand that you're also pressuring states to regulate broadband rates in their state plans, despite the law clearly stating that NTIA shall not regulate rates. Aren't you violating law by pressuring states to do so through the bidding by effectively forcing them to set a price for internet in their plans? What part of the law allows you to pressure the states to include a rate-regulated option in their state plan?
Well, we believe we are acting with fidelity to the statute. The statute requires that there be a low-cost service option, and we have given states a lot of flexibility about how they define it. We do not believe that the states are regulating rates here. We believe that this is a condition to get a federal grant. Nobody is requiring a service provider to follow these rates. People do not have to participate in the program. And if they do participate in the program, there are a lot of requirements, paper they have to file, things they have to do, and one of them is to offer a low-cost service option the way the state defines it.
Well, let me follow up, because, during the debate on the IIJA, members of Congress stated that no rate regulation of broadband service would be authorized or permitted by NTIA as part of the BEAD program. Yes or no, will you approve state plans that set a dollar amount for a low-income broadband plan?
We have approved states that do that, and state plans that do that. We've approved 8 state plans, and some of them do that. And we think that is consistent with the statute, which required a low-cost option.
Well, if the state set a required rate to be offered and you approve this plan, wouldn't your approval be violating the law that prohibits you from that rate regulation?
Again, NTIA is not engaging in anything other than approving states which have put in place grant conditions for how they're going to give out their money. Nobody is requiring any providers to provide service at a particular rate. This is simply a condition of getting these grants. And again, we've given states lots of flexibility about how they choose to implement it. Different states have already, we've seen, taken different approaches. If you look, there's a difference between Louisiana and West Virginia and Nevada. And some of them have chosen to take different, take an approach that's a range. Others have taken different approaches, and we have given them the flexibility.
Well, my time has expired, but I'll take it up with you, and we can converse on this again. My time's expired, and I now recognize the gentlelady from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for opening questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since NTIA was last reauthorized more than 30 years ago, the pace of technological innovation has accelerated exponentially. Today, the House will be voting on the bill to reauthorize the NTIA and provide it with new tools to address the technological challenges of tomorrow. Mr. Davidson, can you describe how this bill will support NTIA's mission, and are there specific tools or authorities you find especially relevant?
First of all, I want to thank the ranking member for your leadership and support on this, and really the whole subcommittee and committee for the support for NTI's reauthorization. As you rightly note, we were last reauthorized over 30 years ago in 1992, before Google existed, before the web was popular. And today, we find ourselves with massive responsibilities in those areas. So updating the statute, our authorizing statute, is long overdue, and we greatly appreciate the committee's attention to it. I think it's important to make the clarity that the new that the reauthorization bill offers about our responsibilities, including in areas like internet policy, cybersecurity, are going to be incredibly important. The clarity around our role in spectrum and other areas, all I think are going to be incredibly welcome. And as I say, something we've been long overdue to get done. So we're hopeful for today's vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ranking Member Pallone and I recently highlighted the BEAD program's role in ensuring every American has access to affordable broadband. This isn't merely a matter of deployment. It's about empowering Americans with the tools necessary for success in the digital world. Administrator Davidson, how is NTIA ensuring that state plans provide affordable broadband services?
Well, first of all, as you note, affordability is incredibly important. The story I told about the woman I met in Georgia is just one of thousands of stories, millions of stories really across America. And it does not help us to build a connection, as you rightly noted in your opening statement, does not help us to build a connection if a low-income family particularly can't afford that connection. So from the start, we've understood that affordability has to be a key component here. The most important thing that we can do under the BEAD program is to enforce the low-cost option, to ensure that there is a low-cost option, as Congress instructed us to do, and we are doing that with the states.
Okay, certainly. The National Spectrum Strategy and Presidential Memorandum on Spectrum represent a critical step forward in our nation's pursuit of technological leadership. These documents successfully strike a balance between promoting private sector innovation and furthering federal missions. I'm committed to supporting NTIA as it executes this strategy. Mr. Davidson, how do you see the Presidential Memorandum informing the studies to be conducted as part of the National Spectrum Strategy?
It's a great question. Thank you, by the way, for your long-term leadership on spectrum issues. I will say that the National Spectrum Strategy was something we sorely needed, a roadmap to provide us with a path to making sure that we were meeting the spectrum needs of the private sector and the public sector. We put out an implementation plan in March, and the presidential memorandum in particular is quite important in underlying all of this because it reaffirms NTIA's role with the FCC as a critical spectrum coordinator. It reiterates our role as the principal advisor and gives us rules of the road for how we're going to work out potential disagreements with other agencies. So it's incredibly important, and we really appreciate Congress's support in making sure we follow the rules of it.
Okay, I work to secure funding for Open RAN and the Chips and Science Act because it can support a more competitive and diverse wireless supply chain while promoting network flexibility and cost effectiveness. Mr. Davidson, NTIA recently announced $420 million in funding to help build the radio equipment needed to advance open network adoption in the United States and abroad. Can you discuss the economic and national security implications of this funding?
Well, the 5G is a very dynamic technology, but the market for 5G equipment has been quite static and concentrated, right? Where there are only really a handful of major suppliers around the world, and two of them are Huawei and ZTE, Chinese competitors that we really quite worry about the security of. So this money is going to make sure that we can build more trusted, more secure, and open networks, and we're very excited to have it and to get this $400 million out.
Thank you. I wanted to get into AI. I don't know how I have time, but the NTI released its AI Accountability Policy Report in March, which calls for improved transparency into AI systems, independent evaluations, and consequences for imposing unacceptable risk of making unfounded claims. Now, I realize that my time has expired here, but I'd like to further ask questions in written form. So thank you.
We welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington, the chair of the full committee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Davidson, you received the questions for the record, the QFRs, from our December oversight hearing on January 3rd. The deadline for response on those QFRs was January 17th. We received a response from you on April 19th, 93 days after the deadline, and coincidentally, the same day that we announced this oversight hearing. Additionally, Chair Latta and I led this subcommittee in sending you a letter on rate regulation following our last oversight hearing, and we asked you to respond by January 12th and received a response on March 19th. These delayed responses concern me. I'd like to ask you, why did it take so long?
I'll just start by saying I'm sorry those responses took so long, and we take the committee's oversight role very seriously. I don't know all the details about why each of those took so long, and I'd be happy to get back to you. I think the process of writing it, the QFRs were quite lengthy. We have to get them all cleared through a complex interagency process, and that often slows us down. That did slow us down, but I think we should do better, and we can do better, and I promise to work to do better in the future.
Well, you're not alone. It just means that I guess we're going to have to do more oversight hearings. NTIA released the first funding notice for the $1.5 billion Wireless Innovation Fund on April 12th, 2023. To date, NTIA has awarded only $140 million, representing 9.2% of the program's funding. Last week, the NTIA released its second funding notice for the program. Finally, the NTIA is putting this money toward the commercialization and the deployment of the technology as the law intended, instead of on university grants. What specific steps is NTIA taking to make sure grant funds in the second notice of funding get out quicker than those in the first notice?
Well, Chair Rogers, thank you for the question. We are excited about this fund. We think it's going to do a lot of good. We think we can really bend the curve in terms of getting more open technology out there and getting a diversity of suppliers, including good American suppliers into this mix where they haven't been successful to date. I just note it is a 10-year program, And we wanted to move, we want to move quickly, but we also want to move smartly and wisely. And so our initial grants were at the amount that we were instructed to do by the statute. And also, we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from industry, put out an RFC, and we were well informed before we did it. The next step for us is this $420 million grant program, grant opportunity. We're getting applications in by the early summer. We expect to turn those around very quickly, and they are focused on commercialization. That is a big part of it. You rightly note we need to make sure that this money is going not just to research, but to commercializing, in this case, the radio units that are so important.
Thank you. You said quickly. My question was, when can we expect the first grants from the second round to be made?
I'd have to get back to you on the exact timing that we're expecting. I know it will be before, it will absolutely be before the end of the year, and I'm expecting them this fall.
Very good. In March, NTIA released the National Spectrum Strategy Implementation Plan as NTIA begins conducting spectrum studies as part of the implementation plan. Can you discuss how you're ensuring relevant agencies engage productively so that we can identify spectrum to be made available for commercial use? The ongoing goal here.
It's our ongoing goal too, and we've really appreciated this committee's leadership and support on that. The implementation plan is key because it's great to have goals, and it's very important to have had the presidential memorandum and the spectrum strategy. But unless we have a plan to actually achieve those goals, we're not going to get to where we want to be. That implementation plan, if you look at it, and I know this committee has seen it, has very clear milestones and timelines and clear responsibilities for other agencies. And I think the authority given within the presidential memorandum that's been laid out and the plan that everybody has now signed up for, all the other agencies have signed up for, give us the ability to now hold agencies' feet to the fire, make sure we are executing on the timelines, and push to get these studies done, some of which will get done, the first of which we really expect to have done this year.
Thank you. I also appreciate you noting the importance of Congress, this committee leading on a privacy bill as a part of the AI roadmap and it being so foundational as a part of what Congress is doing on AI. Keep saying that. All right. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in my opening, Mr. Davidson, I'm concerned that the affordability provisions in BEAD is being watered down by states, and I'd like to offer for the record a letter that the Democratic Communications and Technology Subcommittee members sent to NTIA in March on this topic.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Davidson, since you were here before us now, can you just tell us whether NTIA is engaged in rate regulation? I know that's an issue.
We are not engaged in rate regulation. We are faithful to the statute that we're implementing. Congress instructed us to make sure that there is a low-cost option to ensure that broadband networks that the federal taxpayer dollars are paying for are affordable for low-income Americans. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we're doing it in a way that gives a lot of flexibility to states, and they're choosing different approaches to it.
Thank you. Now, this week, Chair Rogers and I released a discussion draft sunsetting Section 230, and the idea is not to leave the future of online liability to the courts, but rather to spur a serious examination about how to preserve avenues for free speech while ensuring accountability when platforms knowingly put profits over people. So in my opinion, the status quo is just not working, and the sweeping immunity in Section 230 is a fundamental problem. So I just want to ask if you agree that a change is needed to better protect the public from real-world harm.
Well, the president himself has said that large tech platforms need to be held more accountable and that we need serious reform for Section 230. As the internet evolves, the policies that shape it need to evolve as well. And I think what's been proposed as a first step. I think the hard work is really in what will replace Section 230.
All right. Now, finally, I'm concerned about the impact of social media increasingly incorporating more sophisticated artificial intelligence into their platforms and the real risk that this technology could further drive the harmful behavior we've seen from these platforms. So let me ask you a final question. How do we ensure that the artificial intelligence used by social media companies is accountable to consumers?
So that is, it's.
I know that's not an easy question.
We have 2.5 minutes. No, it's an incredibly important question. We know, because we know that responsible AI innovation is going to do a lot of good for people, right? That we understand that building these tools in is going to add a lot of value for consumers, right? Better access to medical care, very interesting ways that people are and businesses are using it. The hard part is that responsible innovation part, and how we are only going to realize the benefits of AI if we deal with the very real risks that exist today. And I think that's the key part of this, is that we have to take a whole of government approach, as we've tried to do in the executive order that the president put out, and look at all the tools we can to make sure that there's accountability and responsibility in the use of these tools. We've done that through we have an accountability report on AI that talks about how to make sure that AI systems are actually doing what they say they're going to do. There's a role for Congress here as well in starting to think about what kinds of guardrails we can really put in place on the deployment of these systems. But I'll also say at the Commerce Department, we have a huge number of homework assignments that we've been given under the executive order that the president put together that really look at a lot of the different parts of what does responsible AI look like. But in the end of the day, we want this innovation to happen here. We want these tools in the hands of consumers because they're going to do a lot of good for people. We've got to deal with those real risks: privacy, security, bias. And the last thing I'll say is a national privacy law would actually help us quite a bit here and in other areas too, because privacy is a huge issue here about the use of data in all these AI systems. So the work of this committee, I'll just say, is central to our ability to address the big concerns in AI.
Well, that's certainly the response that I want to hear. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida's 12th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the Secretary for being here and testifying. On February 29th, the Department of Commerce Inspector General sent you a management alert for the BEAD program. In that alert, the IG proposed 3 actions that are necessary for the success of the $42 billion fund. 2 of those actions are relaxing the BEAD no-FOS fiber preference and extremely high cost per location threshold provision to take into consideration the limited resources to support a fiber preference. And the second one is developing a formal oversight process to ensure overbuilding is limited to those locations permitted by the IIJA. Clearly, it seems that the Inspector General is listening to Congress on these issues. We appreciate that. So, Mr. Davidson, what is the NTIA's, what are they doing to implement those 2 alerts? And please address each turn if possible.
I'll just say, first of all, we always greatly appreciate the attention of the Inspector General. Helps us always make our programs ever better. We want to operate with integrity, and the IG helps us with that. We often, especially in these management alerts, we try to take the recommendations of the IG. We take them very seriously. And in terms of the second part of what you spoke about, the overbuilding issue, I think the committee can feel quite confident. We've heard from this committee about overbuilding quite a bit. I think we've approached it in a very, very careful way that has fidelity to the statute. And I think I haven't looked at the exact detail of that recommendation, but I suspect we're going to be implementing it or have implemented it. I'm not concerned about overbuilding. I think that I'm concerned about it, but I think we've got careful strictures in place to make sure we're dealing with it. On the issue about our approach to technology, I'll just say we also feel quite confident in our approach and that it is consistent with the statute. And we've heard from a large number of stakeholders who were not consulted by the IG in that first recommendation, who've given us a lot of input and given the IG a lot of input since that management alert came out. And as I say, I think we feel very comfortable that we are working to give every American the best internet connection that we can. And for many states, that's going to include a mix of technologies. States are absolutely expecting and will have a wide variety of technologies at their disposal: fiber, fixed wireless, next generation tech tools, alternative technologies like low Earth orbit satellites, all of which are mentioned in the IG report, all of which we expect states to embrace.
All right, thank you very much. I want to get on to the second question. We need more mid-band spectrum to compete with China and achieve global 5G and 6G leadership. I think you understand that. Under the National Spectrum Strategy, NTIA will study the lower 3-band and the 7 and 8 gigahertz band. How did NTIA choose the bands it will study, and do you think there's enough spectrum in these bands for us to maintain our wireless leadership?
First of all, heartily agree with your statement. We do need more mid-band spectrum. We know it, and we're working to find it, and it's hard because it's a difficult process. There's not a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. We went through an extensive interagency conversation and investigation to identify bands where we thought there was promising opportunities for access to mid-band spectrum. And that's where we ended up in the National Spectrum Strategy. It was really like an 18-month process, intensive conversations and investigation, discussions with other agencies. And at the end of the day, all agencies concurred. The White House put out this strategy, and we now have a unified government approach to study those bands. And we're confident that there will be opportunities in those bands to make sure that there's more mid-band spectrum available for a wide variety of uses.
All right, thank you. Let me get to the third question because I know the time is short. The $42 billion BEAD program allowed the NTIA 2% of that funding for administrative purposes. Deploying funding for this program is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Is NTIA currently managing their administrative funding in a way that will last the entire term of these funds?
Yes. Yes, we are, and we feel comfortable with that.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit?
If the chair will allow, I will just say we know we have to be very prudent with the taxpayer dollars. We believe that we've created a life cycle of costs. Congress recently gave us some extra flexibility about how to use our administrative funding. That provides funding for the full life cycle of our programs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York's 9th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you very much, Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Matsui, for convening this hearing on the important work being done by the NTIA. Let me also thank Administrator Davidson for joining us and testifying before us today. As the federal agency in charge of expanding broadband access and adoption, expanding spectrum uses, and establishing more trusted and resilient networks, the importance of NTIA's work cannot be understated, and I'm glad to see critical legislation to reauthorize NTIA advance to the House floor for a vote this week. NTIA has been hard at work over the last 2 years implementing the Internet for All initiative and the historic broadband investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm very appreciative of all the work you've done to bridge the digital divide and bring affordable broadband to the millions of Americans who've been unserved and underserved for far too long. Unfortunately, we are at serious risk of unwinding much of the success we've had in bridging the digital divide due to the upcoming lapse in funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ACP. The ACP provides 23 million American households across the country, including over 65,000 households in my district, with a monthly benefit towards their broadband bill. And without immediate action from us here in Congress, the program will completely run out of funding at the end of this month. This inaction is not just shameful, but nonsensical, and particularly disappointing considering the progress being made with respect to NTIA's BEAD program. It seems we are going to build out all this new broadband infrastructure just in time to rip a critical broadband affordability program away from millions of American families. Just as I did at our hearing in December of last year and countless hearings since, I'm once again urging Republican leadership to get off the sidelines and save the Affordable Connectivity Program. The bipartisan support for the program is undeniable at this point. My bill, H.R. 6929, the ACP Extension Act, currently has 230 bipartisan co-sponsors in the House. Now is the time to act and preserve this critical program. Administrator Davidson, at our last hearing in December, we discussed the interplay between various federal broadband programs, particularly BEAD and ACP, and I want to return to the topic again today for my question, given the increased urgency around the ACP funding. I think you will hear from several of my colleagues about the importance of the affordability in bridging the digital divide, and particularly the success of the ACP. Can you talk about why affordability is important, not just for individual households, but for the well-being and economic stability of communities across the country and the nation as a whole?
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for your leadership on the ACP Extension Act and all of the work to make sure that ACP is on firm financial footing. We really need it. And we need it because, internet access today, it's a necessity, not a luxury, right? And we know that people really rely on it for access to their jobs, to school, to telehealth, access to justice. It's essential today, and if people can't afford it, all of the work we're doing to build these networks will be for naught. It's incredibly important to individuals, but it is also important to the success of our build-out of networks. And that's because if we want to have economically viable networks that we're building, there has to be a customer base for those networks. And we know that our BEAD deployments, the $42 billion we're spending, will be aided if providers know that there's a customer base on the other side. ACP's been essential for that. So for both affordability and for our build-out, we really need ACP.
I was pleased to see the AI accountability report released in March called for improved transparency into AI, as well as independent evaluations of these systems, something I've been calling for years. Can you highlight for the committee some of the key takeaways from the accountability report and shed some light on what NTIA's next steps are now that the report has been released?
I'll just say briefly, we work to answer a simple question: do AI systems perform the way they say they're going to perform? If they say they're private, secure, if they say they don't have bias, how do we know that's true? We need to build out an ecosystem, like we did for financial audits. When you think about the financial audit, how do we know a company made money? Because we know how to do a financial audit. We're going to need to do the same thing for AI systems. And the roadmap for us is to think about, and the report lays out a whole set of steps for NTIA, for the private sector, for Congress too, to make sure that we can build out that auditing ecosystem for AI. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan's 5th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the administrator for being here today. Michigan received the 4th highest BEAD allocation in the country, which shows how serious the digital divide is in our state. With all this money, I'd like to talk about transparency of the BEAD program. I understand that BEAD isn't subject to the Administrative Procedures Act or the Freedom of Information Act. After a state engages in the public comment period on its initial proposal, they submit that plan to NTIA. NTIA then directs the state to make the changes necessary to fulfill the NTIA's requirements. Mr. Davidson, are those negotiations between the state and NTIA made public?
So first of all, thank you for the question. I'll just say we endeavor to be transparent. We don't need a law to tell us to be transparent. We put a lot of this up on our website. There are a lot of conversations that happen, communications that happen back and forth between the states. I will say, due to the sort of confidential nature of and sensitive nature of some of the information, I don't think we routinely publish those. But if there were particular issues that you're interested in, I'd be very happy to sit down with you or your staff.
I'm certainly worried about the transparency of the process, understanding some of the inhibitors to that, but a state spends significant resources and time engaging with the public to craft a proposal that works for its citizens. Then the NTIA takes the plan and molds it into the administration's agenda with zero transparency, for the most part. Will you commit to providing transparent feedback to the states and this committee more so in the future?
As I say, we think we do better with transparency. We've endeavored to be transparent. I certainly would welcome a chance to work with you on that. And
we'll work on
do
that.
Better. Yeah. And again, there are sensitive communications, but also we're trying to be quite clear with states that they have a lot of flexibility about how they implement this program.
The states and the taxpayers want to know that resources are being used appropriately, especially when they go to all the work to get it right. In speaking with our Michigan High-Speed Internet office, they are concerned about how BEAD will interact with other federal broadband programs. I share this concern, and that's why my plan for Broadband Act, which is on the floor this week, would require NTIA to establish a national broadband strategy. BEAD is meant to be the culminating solution to connecting all Americans, but BEAD can't really be successful unless the other broadband programs are also successful. Administrator Davidson, how is the NTIA coordinating with other federal agencies that administer broadband grant programs?
Yeah, Congressman, I think it's an incredibly important question, and you've raised it before, and I think it's so important because if we're going to actually meet this goal of connecting everybody, we have to work together, and we can't waste resources. We can't duplicate funding. So we work together quite closely as a set of agencies, the key agencies that are working on this. I think about USDA, the FCC, the Treasury Department. And we are actually in the process of, actually we have put together an MOU between our agencies so that we're sharing information. We have processes in place for dealing with any kinds of issues or conflicts that come up. We meet regularly, probably too regularly. The White House makes us meet regularly, but this issue that you've raised is very important. We have not waited for a mandate for a broadband strategy to make sure we've got a good coordination mechanism between us, but it's right to highlight it.
Well, NTIA rules state that areas promised broadband through RDOF are not eligible for BEAD funding. That concept makes sense. We'd agree on that. We don't want overbuilding to happen, but what can states do if providers don't meet their RDOF or other programs' commitments?
Congressman, it's a really important question. Our expectation that we don't want to, should not fund programs where service to locations where another federal program exists and is already promised to do funding. So we're taking those off the table as the committee's actually quite encouraged us to do, right? We don't want to duplicate funding. The tricky part will be what happens if providers don't follow through. And our expectation, we've discussed it with some of our other agencies, is that agencies that have funded a particular deployment should continue to seek to fund deployment for those locations.
Well, I'd hope there'd be
someone
some
defaults.
flexibility where BEAD funds could go to those areas.
Timing will matter. And I know we're out of time, but I'll just say, and I'm happy to follow up with you, it's a super important question. Timing will matter a lot. Once the BEAD money goes out the door and the grants get made, it's hard to do more.
Okay.
But we hear you. We hear you. We're on it.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida's 9th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, it's Infrastructure Week this week, and you know it's no joke. $65 billion for broadband internet investment, thanks to the leadership of President Biden and House Democrats, along with some of our colleagues across the aisle. $1.16 billion is going to Florida to expand our internet access through the Broadband Equity Access program. And in my district, it looks like internet for Kenansville and Deer Park, Bull Creek, and Yeehaw Junction, which is a place, by the way, as well as rural East Orange County. These are areas where there's ranches, groves, and farms that help feed America. And they need high-speed internet for precision agriculture. It's also critical to so many rural folks in our district who have small businesses for telemedicine, education, and connecting with family and friends. $7 million so far has gone through the American Rescue Plan to our state already for nearly 300 miles of new fiber optic cable, and we'll see even more investment now under the new infrastructure law. I also recognize, though, we have to keep an eye out because technology is changing, Mr. Secretary. We see satellite internet. We launch, gosh, dozens of Starlink satellites every week from Central Florida. We see cellular getting better as well. And of course, the Affordable Connectivity Program, something that we must come together, no excuses, to fund again here in the Congress. $30 per month plans, 81,000 households in Florida's 9th Congressional District, representing 28% of our constituents, get low-cost internet through the ACP. You know, a lot of people think of Florida as a lot of seniors, but my district's actually pretty young at about 34 years old median age. And so a lot of young families who are, and this is a big help to them. Assistant Secretary Davidson, we saw the states submitted their plans last year, and in the House Appropriations Subcommittee, we heard Secretary Raimondo mention she aims to have all this initial state proposals approved by this fall. Does that track with your timeline as well?
Absolutely. We're laser focused now on reviewing these plans and getting them approved as quickly as possible. We have to work with the states sometimes, which can slow things down, but we're working very hard, and the states are working very hard to get these plans approved. And we've actually, I'll just note, we've broken these plans in half. There's a volume 1 and there's volume 2. We've approved the almost all, 53 out of 56 of the state and territory volume 1s, including Florida's, and the full plans will be approved. We're on track to get those done, as the Secretary said.
Well, we appreciate it, Mr. Secretary, and we know Florida's BEAD proposal includes technology-neutral options like fixed wireless and satellite fiber. Where do you see the future of BEAD funding as it relates to alternative technologies as they continue to advance?
It's a great question, and I think it will vary a lot from state to state. You know, what Rhode Island needs is different from Florida, which is different from Montana. And it will depend a lot on each state and how hard it is to meet their needs. I think we're very excited about these alternative technologies, like some of the unlicensed fixed wireless or low Earth orbit satellites. We're hopeful there'll be a variety of providers of these technologies, and they are absolutely an important part, an essential part of the equation. If we really are going to reach everyone, we're going to need to use all the tools.
Sure, because so in my district where you have our rural areas, some are rural enclaves where we'll have a couple houses, mostly ranches, and they may be closer to urban centers, but a few, I mean, they're way out there, right? And the nearest next home could be a mile or 2 or 3 away, and so we want to make sure we're keeping a balance. The last question, so I understand you served on the task force for the Kids Online Health and Safety Task Force. Can you share any key takeaways from that task force?
Well, it's a really important topic. I know it's one that the subcommittee has thought a lot about too. We hear, as I travel around, so much from parents who are worried about really the epidemic of mental health issues and safety issues that affect America's youth online. I think probably one of the biggest takeaways that I've got is just how urgent the issue is, how difficult it is, but also that while we need to do more research in this area, I think we know enough to know, and I think all of this committee feels we know enough now to act, and you'll be seeing our recommendations coming out sometime late June, probably sometime sort of the target we're looking at.
Well, we look forward to working together to empower parents to help protect their kids online. Thanks so much, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired, and by agreement, we're going to take a 5-minute break for the witness, and we'll resume as soon as you get back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it really free?
Yes, I mean, compared.
My area is if it's a modest hill, I would, you know.
Yeah.
Hang in there, Rob. You're almost there. What's the committee you serve, the subcommittee you serve?
Baker.
Are you sticking on when we get to that? That's the reason. Usually you have to choose between healthcare and telephone, but this time around, the surprising number of people didn't want telephone. So my area, so my, the top employers in my area, in university, multimedia conglomerates, you have to have the stuff. It allows me to work with some major employers in the area. We do a lot of, there's a lot of production in Central Florida, like big movie stuff, like TV shows, and sports and things like that. So, it affects a lot of business. So technology is an environment I'm actually focused, but I couldn't get on
Oh,
a lot of mixed feelings because I really like the sort of protections and medical stuff.
yeah.
See that, that's some protection.
Consumer protection is the biggest technology. I realize how it doesn't have technically internet price, autonomous vehicles, AI, blockchain, flying cars, you name it. It all goes into the committee because it affects consumers, right? So actually, there's a bunch of other, like this committee has a telecommunications technology committee, really with just telecommunications, which is a type of technology, but consumer protection is all technology. And space citizen technology, they do research and things like that, but they don't regulate it, right? They don't sit down. Sure. That is perfect. Whack. Sure. So, the only reason why I'm sitting this has been on this committee since the beginning. So, and help. Yeah, because you've been on hold for a long time. It's just. Sure. Absolutely. There's 5 members who are in the Fiscal Year office. Oh, we're all right. Yeah.
No, not for them.
Oh, yes, yes, you could be her. Chair in the last years. So she'd be like the first one that was gonna mind. I wonder if that's this committee weighs and means. See, it didn't take me any time to get on. It took me I got in the second term.
Here you go. And I'm really glad you have this straightened out. It's better if you just stand it without any bias whatsoever. Just straight away, just straight away. That's great. When you have the chance.
The chair calls the subcommittee back to order, and at this time, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Davidson, I understand you were in South Georgia recently.
I was in Georgia, yes.
In South Georgia or Georgia?
Yeah, it depends on your definition of South Georgia.
Where were you?
I was out Norcross. So,
Norcross.
Yeah, so kind of northeast of
Okay,
Atlanta.
okay. Well, you were in Georgia,
I was in Georgia proper. Yes, yes, sir.
but you wasn't in South Georgia. Okay.
But we did announce some jobs.
Good.
Jobs
We
in
appreciate that
Georgia.
very much.
Yeah.
Listen, it's my understanding that NTIA just had created some categorical exclusions for NEPA and relaxed some permitting restrictions for BEAD applicants. What led to that decision? Why did we need these categorical exclusions?
Well, I will just say from the beginning of this program, we have known that we have heard quite clearly from providers that permitting is an issue that we need to be concerned about. And if we want to have fast and good deployments, we need to make sure we're dealing with permitting issues. We've put together a whole task force to deal with that. And one of the things that we're really working on is streamlining as much as we can, including making sure we have good categorical exclusions for broadband projects.
Understood. And listen, I appreciate the streamlining of the permitting process, and I'm all in favor of that. But I'm just concerned about special treatment only for those who participate in federal programs. I just feel like it should be a level playing field. So if you'll just take mental note of that, I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. My job has been to implement this program as quickly and as fast as we can, and so we're trying to do all we can for that. That I understand your point too.
Okay, I appreciate it. Let me ask you this. Do you believe that we should implement large-scale permitting reform like the American Broadband Deployment Act so that those who participate in BEAD and those who build networks with their own funds should have to overcome the same permitting barriers?
I don't believe the administration's taken a position on the bill that you mentioned, but we do believe that there can be a lot more done to streamline permitting for broadband projects.
And this would be the same for digital discrimination rules by asking for BEAD-built networks to be excluded. Don't you think you're proving that these rules are overly burdensome and unnecessary?
I think that's actually quite different with respect, sir. I think the notion there was that in the process of approving these projects on its face, that meant that there was a federal stamp of approval here, and there was something that was already reviewed. And so I think they're actually quite different. And the fact that we are trying to do what we can for BEAD projects, I hope this committee should expect that we're going to do all that's in our power to make sure that we're moving forward as quickly as we can with these projects.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Oftentimes I think we forget that we've got over 750,000 miles of undersea cables that are transmitting data across the globe, and these cables are a critical part of our network, and they're protecting them from our adversaries as a national security policy and priority, I should say. How are you coordinating with other agencies inside the Department of Commerce like NOAA, and when they consider actions like creating a marine sanctuary and a marine sanctuary that would severely limit the ability to maintain and create new undersea cables?
Well, I would just say, by the way, first of all, strongly agree that undersea cables are incredibly important for our national security, for our economic security, and we are deeply interested in making sure they can move forward. We consult regularly with our colleagues, particularly at NOAA, on the kind of issue that you're speaking about, emphasizing at a staff level particularly. We've discussed with them some of the issues that come up around these sanctuaries.
How can NTIA assure us and ensure that these cables are adequately spaced and maintained to to reduce the potential for tampering by bad actors. And we know that there are bad actors out there who would love to do something with this.
There's a lot of work that's underway. That'd probably be easier to discuss in a different setting, a more
Okay.
appropriate setting. But
Fair
I'd say
enough.
that this is an issue of great interest and concern to us, and across the interagency, there's real effort being made to make sure we're working on those security issues.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that if that's possible, I'd love to participate in that if it need to be in SCIF or whatever.
We can arrange that.
Glad to work on that
Okay.
with your team.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 33rd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Davidson, I know that one of NTIA's primary responsibilities right now is the expansion of broadband, and really happy that when the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, that this really became more of a focus,
Right.
and more of something that has really been a big benefit, whether it's a blue or a red district, because as you know, it's helped a lot of rural communities. And I wanted to ask you, you know that a lot of members like myself have been outspoken proponents of the ACP.
Yeah.
And the ACP is unfortunately going to see the plug pulled on it here soon, to be, quite frank. And I can tell you that in the district that I represent alone in Dallas and Fort Worth, that's about 1 in 4 households in my district. And so I was hoping that you could tell us today that NTI is working closely with states on implementation of the BEAD grant program. And in your opinion, is there broad support from states to keep the ACP funded from states?
There is a huge deal. Well, first of all, I think states have a great deal of recognition of the importance of ACP.
Good.
For affordability, and I think there's a wide array of support, and I say it's bipartisan support for affordability at the state level and for the importance of ACP. And as you know, it affects a huge community, and people don't always realize it's military families. Nearly half of the recipients of BEAD are military families, including veterans. 15% of all rural households, so this is all households that are rural households in America, 15% of them are ACP recipients. So it's a huge, it's going to have a huge impact if it disappears, and probably the most important thing we can do, that Congress can do, is work to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another one that doesn't get as much attention as the ACP, but I think that is hugely important, is the Connecting Minority Communities pilot program that was established in 2021 that focused on increasing connectivity around historically black colleges and Hispanic serving institutions. And, oftentimes these institutions are overlooked, quite frankly, for the larger, state universities and, more prestigious elite private universities that are oftentimes in the news. And I know that this Connect Minority Communities pilot program has allocated funds to 8 schools in Texas, which are going to be essential for upgrading and ensuring that students have access to state-of-the-art technology. And I was hoping that you could explain how this program is helping colleges, and more importantly, how it's helping students prepare for, for the future, quite frankly.
I'll just say the CMC program, the Connecting Minorities Community Program, it's just a wonderful program. I've had a chance now to visit a number of the different recipients, and what they are doing, often with not a lot of money, but it has a huge impact on their student populations, on the communities that they exist in. They're doing workforce training, they're doing STEM education, they're doing apprenticeship programs, they're getting devices out into the hands of the community members who need them. They're helping with broadband subscriptions sometimes in their communities. It's been very innovative. There's not a one-size-fits-all. There are a number of great recipients in Texas. And this is a program where if we had more resources, we could do a lot more. but it's been very successful so far.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I know also, speaking of Texas, that it's a huge challenge because we're a very large state, very populated state, very spread out state. And I know that we received the largest allocation of BEAD money, a little over $3 billion. And I was hoping that you could elaborate briefly on how NTIA is ensuring that states, including Texas, are effectively utilizing their allocated funding for infrastructure deployment, mapping, and adoption, including planning and capacity building.
Well, it is a lot of money. $3.3 billion for the state of Texas. And that is why these plans have been so important. And I know sometimes people have asked, why are the plans so long? Why do we need to do them? But I think Congress very wisely, when it created this statute, said there has to be a plan first. We gave states money for plans, which doesn't usually happen. And every state put together a plan. Every state has now submitted these initial plans. And those plans, we are requiring them to show, most importantly, how we're going to reach everybody in the state. Mm-hmm. And that is a top requirement. That's part of why the review of these plans takes so long. But I've been, I have to say, really impressed with the states. They have really stepped up. I think everybody wants to achieve this goal. It's a bipartisan goal. And we've got federal program officers out in every state, including a fantastic federal program officer in Texas, who are there to help the states in this job.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back, and Chairman recognizes himself now for questioning. Mr. Davidson, welcome. In the second notice of funding opportunity for the Wireless Innovation Fund, I appreciate that NTIA is requiring vendors to partner with a wireless operator. This is helpful to ensure that funded technology gets deployed in the market. I have concerns, however, that vendors can only be a part of one application. This kind of seems to undermine our goals of creating multi-vendor networks. Can you or can you all explain why vendors are limited and how that policy furthers the goal of what we would call open, interoperable networks?
So first of all, I'll just say thank you for noticing. We're very excited about this program and particularly about this second notice that we're putting out. $400 million is a lot of money in this industry for the commercialization of these tools. And we've asked for this partnership because we really want commercialization. We don't want just radio vendors to develop this technology and not have a place to sell it. I'll have to get back to you. I'd like to be able to get back to you and your staff with a follow-up because my impression was that there was going to be opportunities for people to partner with multiple other providers, and I just want to make sure I get it right with you. But part of the key here, though, is that we did want to make sure that everybody had a partner so that a radio vendor wasn't just going to develop radio that nobody else wanted to buy. And so that was the whole idea behind it.
But you do understand the need for having some
okay. And we are committed to interoperability, to openness. That's the whole idea of this program, and making sure that people can sell to multiple vendors is the ultimate goal. It's just a question of what we're funding with our program.
Yeah, okay, well, I appreciate that. I've also had some concerns about Chinese influence. I hope we all have, quite frankly, in organizations like the Orion Alliance, given the status of China Mobile and other CCP-affiliated corporations as, quote, founding members, end quote, of that organization. Specifically, those companies have set up open testing and integration centers that actually advertise a technical facility in which Orion companies can test their technologies for that very interoperability, quote unquote, inviting foreign corporations to test their products on Chinese soil, of all places. To what extent has the administration actually studied the possibilities, the dangers of CCP influence over the recommendations of the Orion Alliance to the rest of the world? Do you know?
I'll just say that our concern about Chinese influence in this market is what kind of underpins this whole program. We want to make sure that there are trusted vendors out there and trusted networks are being built. And we believe that open, interoperable networks, where you can have lots of trusted providers participating, are a key path here. So the whole program is about that. We have watched and are concerned about PRC influence in some of the standards bodies, and that is part of why we funded our own testing sites. And the first round of ORAN, Open RAN funding that came from our Wireless Innovation Fund was particularly focused on testing and evaluation. So we had testing sites here in the U.S. that people could use to make sure that we're combating that influence that you discussed.
Do you have any figures, do you know, about how successful those centers on Chinese soil have been?
We could try and get that data. I don't have any with me right now, but I know that we've looked at those issues, and our testing sites are new, but we're very optimistic about our ability to compete.
I mean, we would like to know exactly how far along China is in that and how successful they are if we're going to compete successfully. So then, what safeguards does the administration have in place to ensure that funds from the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund are not being used of American companies that have maybe already tested their technologies in Chinese facilities?
Well, first of all, we're very clear about how the funds can be used, and we are funding work that's happening here in the United States. In terms of, I think honestly, the companies that we're funding understand. We've been pretty clear about our concerns. They all understand why we are funding this work, and I could come back to you with the more detailed answer about the particular restrictions we put in place.
I appreciate that, because we'd really like to know, how much exposure, if you want to call it that, there is there. So the chair will yield back and now recognize Ms. Eshu of California for at least 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member, Congresswoman Matsui, for holding this important hearing. It's wonderful to see you here again, Alan, and to have the advantage of listening to so many of the questions that have been asked, the scrutiny of this program, which is so important by members on both sides of the aisle. Congress has been working on bridging the digital divide for almost 30 years. I remember in my first and second term here in the Congress, I had President Clinton and Vice President Gore in my district pulling wire in schools. So we've been on a pathway. It's always been bipartisan in terms of the support, because we understood that all of our constituents, no matter what state we're from, no matter what the terrain is, no matter what the geography is, that this is something that was going to benefit all of our constituents, and we've been trying to work toward that all of these years. I think, regrettably, there wasn't one Republican on this committee that voted in favor of the infrastructure law that contained the BEAD program. This is singularly the largest investment in broadband and getting it to everyone in our country in the history of our country. So I welcome all the questions, because we know we need to get this right. We're not going to see this kind of an investment again, probably not in my lifetime anyway. So we need to get it. We need to get it right. The BEAD program is, I think, our best opportunity, as I said, in our lifetime, to address what the shortcomings are and really connect everyone to the 21st century. We're in the second decade of the 21st century, so we have to optimize the time. On the affordable connectivity program, having access to broadband is one part of this, and a very important one. Everyone has been speaking to it. You certainly have. But for Americans, for many Americans, they can't afford it. So it's one thing if it's available, but if you can't afford it, it's as if it doesn't exist. So 22 million households. I think I did not realize that almost 50% of the people that are in this program are our military families. So Congress really needs to get its act together to fund this. And I think, we have, over 200 co-sponsors on the legislation, so hopefully that's going to be resolved soon. In your written testimony, you addressed the connection between ACP and the success of the BEAD program. Can you tell us why one is so dependent on the other?
It's a great question. First of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for your long-term support for the internet, for internet access, your long-term leadership on so many of these technology policy issues. It's really an incredible legacy. And on these questions about ACP, I think you've said it so well. The affordability is so critical, and it's not just critical for the 2.9 million people in California who get ACP. But as I had mentioned, 15% of all rural households are on ACP. So when we're doing build-outs into rural areas with BEAD, you want to make sure that there's a customer base for those networks that we're building. ACP has been a critical part of that, making sure that there are customers on the other side of that network connection and that we're building economically viable networks. So it makes it a lot more economically viable. It helps with our BEAD build-out. It also, of course, addresses these real access issues.
Wonderful. I'll submit my other questions to you in writing, but I am interested in the report that you released on the AI Accountability Policy Report. I have the pleasure of co-chairing the House AI Caucus, a member of the Speaker and Minority Leaders, Committee on AI, and I think that the work that you're doing is really important. Do you have any idea when this is going to be come out?
Well, I'll just say very quickly, because I know we're at time, our AI accountability report is out. It came out in March. Happy to brief you and the committee more fully on it. I think we allude to it, and we're doing a second report about the openness of leading edge models, and that will come out this summer.
Wonderful. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back and thank you for holding the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The gentleman the chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Allen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Davidson, thank you for appearing before our committee. I want to follow up on an item that I raised with you here when you were here in December. It's namely NTIA's ill-advised proposal to force labor union-friendly provisions into states as part of the BEAD process. I know that last week NTIA approved 3 state plans. All 3 of those states are right-to-work states. 2 of those states did not include any labor union mandates, while 1 included some limited mandates. And you realize in a right-to-work state, you cannot, you do not have to pay union dues to hold a job. My question is, Mr. Davidson, will you commit to me that NTIA will continue to approve BEAD plans by right-to-work states that decline to include the menu of labor union provisions NTIA is pushing?
Congressman, first of all, thank you for the question. We've discussed this a little bit before, and as you can see from the plans that we've approved, we expect to approve plans like the ones that you've seen. And I think we've said all along that the only real labor requirements in our NOFO are that they have to be in compliance with federal law. And I think that we've recognized the the issues that come up with right-to-work.
All that does run up the cost.
Yeah,
I mean, and prohibits some of our local folks from being able to do that. Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
Will you commit to me that NTIA will continue to approve BEAD plans by those right-to-work states and in compliance with their laws? I mean, the state laws. I mean,
I think the answer to the
there's
first
also
question was
state
yes,
funding involved here. Okay.
And
small broadband providers have expressed growing concern with how states subject to NTIA approval may define the minimum area that any provider must apply to serve. They're worried that how a potential project area is structured may affect small company participation, ultimately impact rural broadband build-out. I'm concerned that how a project area is designed may discourage small rural providers from participating in the BEAD program. Has NTIA heard from smaller providers about this potential issue?
We have, and we share your concern.
Is NTIA planning to work with states on project sizes and how best to maximize deployment of fiber while also allowing the need for alternative technologies?
We are working with them, and it's an ongoing issue. We try to provide as much flexibility as possible to states, but we are tracking this issue, and we share the concern.
On Monday, NTIA, alongside other Department of Commerce agencies, took the first step in ensuring that internet traffic reached its intended target and stays away from prying eyes of adversary nations like China. By implementing key internet routing security measures, we are finally beginning to address a problem that has been a concern for over 20 years. What is the significance of this action, and do you believe other departments will follow the Department of Commerce's leadership on this issue?
It's very important. I'm so glad you asked about it. We do a lot of really nerdy things at NTIA. This was maybe one of the nerdiest that we've done, but it's also very important.
Okay.
Routing security is something that's often really overlooked, the ability to quickly change where traffic goes. This is a critical element. It's one also that has been underutilized both in the private sector and the public sector. The reason for what we did on Monday was to lift up the fact that it is not that hard to do this. We've put in place good contractual mechanisms that make it easier for federal agencies to do it. And now I think our hope is that there will be a lot of other federal agencies that will follow suit. We're glad to take the lead on that.
Good, and I'm glad you did. Thank you. The NTIA's most important role is the sole manager of spectrum for federal agencies and acting as the sole advisor to the President on spectrum matters. Both are clearly stated in current law. Obviously, we are out of spectrum. While federal agencies may have competing interests in spectrum use and their own assessment of how spectrum should be managed, shouldn't NTIA effectively be ceding its congressionally directed role to others if any one federal agency were permitted to act as a free agent and advocate for a particular spectrum-related outcome outside the NTIA spectrum management process?
So we take our statutory mandate very seriously. I think it's been reinforced under the presidential memo. We continue to exercise the authority that Congress has given us to make sure that we operate as the main advisor to the president on spectrum issues.
Well, if we are going to be a world leader, we have to figure the spectrum out.
Absolutely agree, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady, my neighbor from Texas, Ms. Fletcher, for at least 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Weber. Thanks to you and, of course, to Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Matsui for convening today's hearing to discuss the central role that the NTIA plays in spectrum management, as we were just discussing broadband deployment, which I have a few questions on, and developing other federal telecommunications and technology policy. Administrator Davidson, thank you so much for being here today and your very insightful and helpful discussion on these topics. This week in Washington, of course, we are recognizing National Police Week, and we honor and remember our law enforcement officers who are critical components of our public safety system. One of NTIA's many important responsibilities is supporting public safety communications, and that includes overseeing the First Responder Network Authority, or FirstNet. And since January of 2018, all 50 states and 6 territories have opted into FirstNet, and they use it to coordinate state and local law enforcement activities. I know Texas's 7th Congressional District that I have the privilege of representing is benefits from the nationwide public safety broadband network and has helped facilitate more effective crisis response, both from the COVID-19 pandemic and natural disasters and other challenges that we have experienced in recent years. So I want to ask you, Administrator Davidson, about the importance of reauthorizing FirstNet before its sunset in 2027. If you could share your thoughts with us on that would be helpful.
Thank you so much for that question. You know, FirstNet it plays an incredibly important role because the needs of first responders to be able to communicate, our public safety workers to be able to communicate with each other, especially at a time of crisis, is so important. And in many ways, it's been an incredible success story. We have over 5.5 million first responders all around the country who are now using the FirstNet network, which is incredible for something that started less than 10 years ago, right? It is also really important that we make sure to reauthorize this program. And the authorization sunsets in 2027. We do not want to wait that long. We need to make sure that there's real good certainty for how the program can proceed. So this is something that Congress can really help us with, ensuring that this program's on firm footing going forward. And the only other thing I'd say is, when there's a bad day somewhere in America, FirstNet is there today. And they prepare for big events. They prepare for the worst. They're there in hurricanes, fires, all sorts of situations. Our first responders rely on them. We need to make sure that network is sustained. So thank you for your support.
Well, thank you so much. And I do want to note for my colleagues on the committee that I have a bill. My bill is the FirstNet Reauthorization Act, and it would reauthorize this program and strike the original sunset provisions. So I look forward to working with members of the committee on this topic. Many of my colleagues today have also focused their questions on the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the BEAD program, the success of which is reliant on efficient and responsive permitting. Right. So this is another area where I have a bill that I'd love to ask you a little bit about, because I really applaud the agency for its recent announcement to help make federal permitting smoother for BEAD broadband deployment. My concern, however, has been the long potential permitting backlogs and bottlenecks at the local level. And so one of the things I noted, I think just last month, the Pew Charitable Trust found in a survey of 36 states that local permitting is a key concern and potential barrier to deployment. And I know we talk about permitting reform in a lot of contexts on this committee, but it certainly seems to be an issue here. Part of the concern is that some of the smaller and more rural communities just don't have the infrastructure, the personnel to do the permitting, whether it's sort of workforce and expertise challenges to move these deployments quickly. And so my bill, the Broadband Incentives for Communities Act, would help address that, giving communities a grant program and tools that they need to be able to prevent and address these bottlenecks. So can you talk a little bit about, with the 30 seconds you have left, what you're doing to work with local governments to ensure that they're ready for the increased applications and how we can help facilitate that from Congress?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right to highlight this as an issue. Permitting is a giant concern for us, especially because we're going to have a large burst of projects that are going to come through in the next few years, and we want to make sure that we can get them through the permitting process in a timely way. It's something we've heard a lot about. We're doing a ton at the federal level. The local level is really important. We've required states in their broadband plans to show how they're addressing the state and local permitting issues. More resources at the local level would certainly help quite a bit. So thank you for your leadership on this issue and for putting a spotlight on it. It's going to be really important to our success.
Thank you so much, Administrator Davidson. I have a couple of questions I couldn't get to, so I will submit them for the record and yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee for at least 5 minutes.
At least. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Davidson, for being here today. In several places, the BEAD program Notice of Funding Opportunity expresses preference for unionized workforce, paying prevailing wages and providing detailed information regarding a sub-grantee's compliance of its contractors and subcontractors with labor and employment laws. Specifically, NTIA encourages states to require the use of directly employed personnel instead of contractors or subcontractors, project labor agreements, labor peace agreements, and to commit to union neutrality. The overwhelming number of ISPs in this country do not have unionized workforces or rely only on directly employed personnel, so that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for most companies. I'm concerned that NTIA's guidance could deter ISP participation in already difficult labor markets because these union preferences are extremely burdensome and administratively difficult and inefficient, and most significantly, these preferences are nowhere to be found in the bipartisan infrastructure law, sir. So how will BEAD succeed if experienced, well-qualified ISPs can't afford to comply with these costly and onerous requirements?
Well, we think that we know that there's a wide variety of providers who will be able to provide service here under the BEAD requirements. We don't require all the things that you, I think, mentioned. We do require that, for example, everybody comply with federal labor practices and federal labor law and state requirements as well. And our belief is that we will actually be able to get providers to be able to do this, and it's not an onerous requirement. Shouldn't be surprising that this, this administration is in favor of, good, high-paying, safe work environments for workers. We've tried to be respectful of the fact that different states have different approaches, and that there are a variety of providers out there.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's my understanding that at least 3 middle mile grants have been terminated, or that NTIA has taken the steps to terminate some of these grants based on the lack of performance. And can you please provide us with an update on these projects and commit to keeping Congress in the loop as this program progresses?
Absolutely glad to keep you in the loop. We're always disappointed when a project doesn't come through, but I think it also just shows we're watching these programs like a hawk. If somebody's not able to follow through with their obligations, we really want to make sure we terminate it, get the money back, and redeploy it where we can. So these middle mile projects are fantastic projects. Generally, we're very bullish about this program. Where it doesn't work out, we're on top of it too, and we'll keep you posted.
Be good stewards of our money. We've seen several states' initial BEAD proposals be released in the past few weeks. I guess my question is, what lies ahead of these states as they start the one-year clock on their final proposals?
It's a great question, because this is now sort of the rubber hits the road for states in the BEAD program. And this is going to be a really big year for states. We're approving their plans, and they are off to the races. The states are doing challenge processes, which is where they finally confirm who actually are the unserved locations that they need to serve. And then they'll be doing their grant-making processes. And there's we've given states a lot of flexibility. Different states are doing it in different ways, but they all have a year to do it. And it's going to be a lot of work for them. But this is really what we've been planning for and working towards, which is this will be when the money goes out the door, when the states choose their providers.
Exactly. I want to make sure I've got enough time for the last question. An agency within NTIA, the First Responder Network, or FirstNet, is actively lobbying the FCC to take spectrum away from state and local first responders and give it to FirstNet and its private contractor for commercial use. And just recently, on April 26th, the Southwest Border Sheriffs and Texas Border Sheriffs filed a letter with the FCC requesting that the FCC not hand this valuable spectrum over to FirstNet. So why is an agency within NTIA advocating to take spectrum away from border sheriffs?
Well, thank you for the question, because I think that there's no desire to take spectrum away from people who are using it today. And I think what's quite clear, I think, in it all, and this is an ongoing proceeding at the FCC. Ultimately, the FCC will have to decide. It's been an ongoing proceeding for some time. And the most important thing, though, is that we make sure that we preserve the uses for those who are using it today and make sure that they're taken care of. And I'll also just say, the administration has not weighed in on or filed in that proceeding and reached has not weighed in on that proceeding. But we take those issues you're raising quite seriously.
Well, just keep us updated on that too, sir.
Absolutely.
In a timely fashion.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Cardenas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate Chairman Lara and also Ranking Member Matsui for holding this important hearing. And thank you to our witness for being here today to give us some feedback and your expertise on what is really going on out there. We've already heard a great deal about the crisis we're currently facing with ACP funding and the negative impact that could have on success of our historic BEAD investments. I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle didn't vote for the bipartisan infrastructure law, which launched both BEAD and ACP, but they seem to be happy to go back to their districts and brag about all the money that's coming to their districts. And I'm happy for their constituents that this good policy is actually reaching every part of the country. I'd like to also once again implore my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to work with us over the next few weeks to head off this catastrophe with the ACP funding. I'd also like to note the rhetoric we've heard that the BEAD affordability requirements in the IIJA are akin to, quote, rate regulations. I think that's a ridiculous way of looking at it. Everyone in this country should be able to take advantage of the infrastructure we're building, regardless of their income or household resources. I hope that we can all come together and come to our senses and continue to make this happen. With that, I'm going to start my questions with spectrum. The National Spectrum Strategy mentions the 7 gigahertz band as a candidate for wireless broadband use, whether licensed or unlicensed, while recognizing the importance of protecting existing federal mission-critical operations. I've heard from federal agencies involved in the 7 gigahertz study that the NTIA may be focusing the exploration of this band on only full power commercial use. Mr. Administrator Davidson, would the NTIA permit agencies to consider the full range of options and their potential commercial use in their study of the 7 gigahertz band? Will they?
Yes. Happy to reassure you and others that these studies are expected to explore the full range of uses, low power, mid power, high power uses. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. I'd also like to touch on concerns about permitting issues. Construction of critical projects should not be unduly delayed by unacceptably slow reviews or unreasonable fees. We must strike a balance between protecting communities and expanding and improving broadband in an efficient and a cost-effective manner. Administrator Davidson, I know that you share these concerns and your agency has done a tremendous amount of work to ease any unreasonable burdens, like NTIA's recent adoption of new categorical exclusions for BEAD projects, for instance. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain how you think targeted permitting reform can yield more equitable results when it comes to broadband deployment?
Yes, this is a super important question. We have heard from the beginning of this program that that permitting could be a real obstacle to our ability to deploy in some of the communities that most need these networks. We have been working, and at the federal level particularly, to do what we can to streamline the permitting process for these broadband projects that we're administering. We have a Tiger team, some of the best permitting nerds in the business, and we've had some real successes. We've expanded the set of categorical exclusions that we've put in place. We've streamlined the historical preservation process. We've got a new mapping tool that helps people see where there might be permitting issues in the projects they're planning. So it's all a long way of saying, like, we're doing all that we can as quickly as we can to make sure we're streamlining permitting, and we think that's very important.
Thank you. Now, pivoting to the NTIA's work on artificial intelligence, one of the policy recommendations made in the NTIA's Artificial Intelligence Accountability Policy Report suggested that the government may have a role in shaping standardized disclosures for AI systems and models, similar to how we've handled food nutrition labels. Administrator Davidson, what information would be helpful to include in a standardized label for AI systems and models?
Well, that's an area, first of all, thank you for raising it. We think it's an incredibly important and potentially very helpful area. People are working on this now. It's actually a very active area, and what we've called is for more research to make sure we understand exactly what people need to see in these labels. I mean, things like, how a model or a system approaches privacy, security, bias in the models, and making sure that we can find ways to measure that, quantify it, show it to people, like an FDA nutrition label. And that's a very active area of work right now, and one that we need to be supporting more of.
Okay, thank you. How would disclosure like this make AI safer for average Americans?
Well, I think we know that AI is going to bring a lot of benefits, but only if we deal with the very real risks that are out there. There are real risks to privacy, to security. We're concerned about bias in these systems. We're concerned about misuse. And by being more transparent about how systems operate and by bringing more accountability, our whole report is about how do we make sure that systems operate the way that people say they are. And so thank you for your question. It's a big area of ongoing work.
Thank you, May. Time expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Dr. Joyce from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today. And to you, Assistant Secretary Davidson, for being with us. Following our previous oversight hearing in December, a letter was sent to NTIA based on my line of questioning. Unfortunately, the response that we received was delayed, was vague, and failed to address the issue of rate regulation. It is my hope that today we can receive some greater clarification than what that original response was. Assistant Secretary Davidson, you have testified before Congress multiple times about the infrastructure's law, clear prohibition on rate regulation. The infrastructure law says, and I'm quoting, "Nothing in this title may be construed to authorize Assistant Secretary or the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to regulate the rates charged for broadband service," unquote. In last December's hearing, you assured this committee that you would not engage in rate regulation, and you would, now I'm quoting again, embrace the sort of laboratory of democracy, let different states approach this in different ways. Yet you have only approved 6 state plans, plus the District of Columbia, all of which appear to regulate broadband rates by adopting a specific price for broadband service. We now understand from states like Virginia that NTIA has threatened to withhold approval of state Volume 2 plans unless they agree to NTIA's rate regulation demands. We have heard from numerous states that the pressure from NTIA is real, and the threat of losing funds was too great not to give in to these demands. Congress did not envision NTIA circumventing the explicit ban on rate regulation, especially not by back-channeling and conditioning NTIA's approval of plans on states agreeing to use BEAD funding to impose rate regulation mandates when they don't want to do so. Obviously, this is incredibly troubling, especially in light of your and the Secretary's prior sworn testimony to this committee that NTIA was not engaging in such pressure tactics which are prohibited by the IIJA. So I'm asking you, once again, will you assure this committee that you will allow the laboratory of democracy to function and approve a state plan that does not set a specific price for low-income broadband plan, middle-class affordability plan, or for certain tier services like the symmetrical gigabyte service?
Those are a whole bunch of different things, sir, but I will just say that we are not engaged in rate regulation. We are following, we're faithful to the statute. There are conditions to the grants that broadband providers will get. There are a lot of conditions that they have to meet. One of them is that they'll have to obey the low-cost option that the state puts in place. States have put in place, some states have chosen to put in place lots of different approaches. We've seen ranges, we've seen prices, we've seen a lot of different things. But again, we do not believe that that is rate regulation. We are not setting a price. We are not requiring that.
And there are no pressures that you're placing on the individual states as they present their plans to you?
States have to meet the requirements of the statute, and they have to meet the requirements of our funding.
And there is no threat of losing those funding if they don't follow any type of price setting that is coming from the NTIA?
They have to follow the requirements of of our funding notice and our statute. And
I find it an interesting answer. And since in NTIA's red line version of the Virginia State Plan, you provided feedback, and again, I'm going to quote, "The Assistant Secretary must be able to determine the impact to a customer at the initial proposal stage. It isn't enough to know as a final proposal. Thus, the low-cost option must be established in the initial proposal as an exact price or formula." Those are your words. Yes or no? Is that NTI forcing states to adopt rate regulation? The answer seems clear to me.
I don't know the communication that you're speaking of.
We'll provide that
I
communication.
would like to
Again,
see
we
it.
are providing that for you moving forward. Mr. Davidson, if NTIA insists on violating the infrastructure law by only approving state plans with specific prices, how does NTIA plan to accomplish the goal of closing the digital divide if there is little interest in bidding?
Well, sir, we think that there will be interest in bidding, and I can just tell you, I've talked to many state broadband offices. They are keenly interested in making sure that they are meeting the requirements of affordability, which is the third word in the statute that we're implementing, affordable. And they also want to make sure that providers show up for the program. They are all working hard to make sure that both of those things are true. We want to make sure that's true as well.
And I think this committee definitely wants to know, and I want the assurance from you that there is no arm bending. There is no pressure is being put on to make sure that BEAD funding is not tied to any pressures from your office.
As long as states submit proposals that show clearly how they're meeting the affordability requirement of the low-cost option under our notice, they'll be approved. But they have to show that to us.
And we'd like to see it shown to us here in committee as well. I thank you for being present here with us today. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Kelly for at least 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Assistant Secretary Davidson for your testimony today and the work of NTIA is conducting. I know it's come up already, but I want to echo my support for the Affordable Connectivity Program and the tremendous benefits it has provided to Illinois. Over 700,000 households in the state, including almost 80,000 in my district, are saving on the cost of internet service each month. It has amounted to over $400 million in savings, and for low-income households, this may be the difference between having reliable home internet that month or not. And I hope we can come together to keep the program going. As we are all witnessing the emergence of novel AI technologies and systems, I am intrigued by the many potential benefits and uses, especially as AI continues to develop and gain abilities. Yet while Americans are realizing the benefits of novel AI technologies, there have been incidences where AI and algorithmic systems have led to harmful outcomes. As a member of this committee and someone who partnered with then Congressman Will Hurd of Texas on a white paper series on AI, I am focused on how AI system developers and deployers should have mechanisms in place to prioritize the safety and well-being of people and the environment and show that AI systems work as intended. We all know that President Biden signed an executive order to establish and adopt a coordinated federal government-wide approach for safely and responsibly developing and using AI. In response to the executive order, NTIA requested comments on open source AI systems. Based on the comments NTIA has received, can you please share some of the pros and cons with open source AI systems?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a really interesting and important question. As we're looking at these cutting-edge models in particular, the foundation models, as many call them, we're trying to explore this question about whether opening up the model weights, what are the benefits and what are the risks? And that's the report that we're working on. And we were very gratified to receive a lot of comments in response to our request for comments. I think what's clear is that what's very clear from the comments is, first of all, people do see real benefit in openness, and that it can provide more access to technology, more competition. We don't want the most important models to only be controlled by a small set of players. At the same time, we've also heard about real risks and concerns about how to make sure that models are not misused, particularly the high-end models. And so that is the path we need to look through. I think probably one key learning that I'll just add is people have really encouraged us to look at the incremental harms. So not just like, is it harmful, is it not harmful to do this, but also how is it different from the closed models? You know, would openness be that much worse than the closed models and what's out there already? And so we are trying to take a very careful look at that. But our report will be out this summer, or it's due to the White House, I should say, this summer, and we will get our homework assignment done and look forward to sharing more.
Thank you so much. When you were here before, I referenced my bill with Congressman Josh Harder and asked about the importance of AI accountability measures for AI systems. Given all the recent talk and legislation around TikTok, AI, kids' mental health while using social media and other online platforms as it relates to protecting kids' mental health online, I'm curious to hear some of the things you all have learned from both your role as co-chair of the White House Task Force on Kids Online Health and Safety and the agency's work on AI accountability.
It's been great to be able to work on these projects together, because I think first of all, thank you for your leadership on AI accountability. The report we put out really focused on how important it is to make sure that we're dealing with the fact that AI systems are going to offer great benefits, but only if we deal with the very real risks, the risks that exist today. It's a real tie-in with our work on kids' safety right now, because I think that some of the challenges that we're going to see for kids online are only going to be exacerbated by the rising use of AI. And I'll just even start with look at the incredibly concerning use of what we call synthetic content, deep fakes, and how that can affect young people online. So we're keenly interested in dealing with both of these issues. I'll say the Kids Safety Task Force that I co-chair is looking very carefully and thinking a lot about not just how do we help caregivers, but also what are the best practices for companies and platforms that are making some of this content available to young people, and we really need to do both. It's a very important and difficult time, I think, for particularly for families, for caregivers out there, and we need to give them more tools, and we need to make sure companies are more accountable in the space.
Thank you. My time is up, and I yield back.
Gentleman from one of the energy centers of Texas is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Pfluger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant Secretary, thanks for being here. The title of my questioning is Concern, bureaucratic delays that affect national security. All agencies will be equally hit on this questioning, so thank you for being here. Let's start with Link 16, something near and dear to my heart, which is a Blue Force tracker. If you're not familiar, it's used in all domains of fighting, including air, sea, land. I used it personally. It's an incredibly important methodology and way that we fight, because you have to be able to track your other compatriots out there. The FAA has really cracked down on the DoD's methods for certification, and what I'd like to know as a head of NTIA and really tasked with solving interagency issues and conflicts. There are severe disagreements between DoD and FAA. What are you and NTIA able to do? Because if we don't have this Blue Force tracker, then we can't fight in a joint capacity, and it's very concerning that they have certified 0 new weapon systems since the FAA, that is.
So I'll start by saying thank you for the question, and I know this is an issue that you've been deeply involved in. I think we've given TA on some of the potential language around this for the NDAA. You're right, it is a very important issue that we need to figure out how to work with, because this is an important band and area of work for the FAA, but we know how essential it is for our war fighters. And it's coming up more and more, and that's probably the thing that's really exacerbating this. So we've had a series of individual issues that have come up with this, where NTIA has really tried to serve as an honest broker
I'll
between.
pause you right there. Can you respond to me in writing on what that timeline looks like and
Sure.
how you're working through? Because I've got some other questions.
Absolutely. You know what? Very happy to do that, and some of it may be done in a better in a different setting, and so we'll absolutely happy to talk about it.
When we're talking about NTIA and DoD, let's talk about embers. Let's talk about the shared spectrum. We recently held a hearing, I believe you were there, a classified setting, and without getting into classified data, I was very disappointed in what the DoD produced when it comes to the ability to share in the lower 3. And so what I really want to know, as the principal entity responsible for solving and resolving these interagency conflicts, can you provide a clear timeline of when NTIA's work is going to be done so that we can actually move forward, get past the bureaucratic red tape, and then I have another question after this.
Sure. I'll just say briefly, it's a very important area. You heard it in the other setting. You know, the study was that the DoD did, we supported the result of understanding about what the limits of sharing are. But we think this band is too important to give up on.
Do you have a timeline for when
the timeline is going to be, it's laid out in the National Spectrum Strategy. It's 2 years to do the study. But it is we're going to do it within 2 years. We've got an implementation plan in place. I think it is a non-trivial issue to think about, and we've been really focused on particular systems.
DoD's study was millions of dollars, and that timeline to me is very concerning. That's why I label this questioning concern, because it just seems like the bureaucratic red tape is actually getting in the way, and we're going to get lapped by China.
We would love to do it faster. I just want to be realistic about what it takes to do these studies. This one, we will be leading. We have confidence in our path forward. We see a path to doing something that's productive in the space, which is why we've pushed for it, and we will hit that mark. It is not something you can do overnight. And I'm sorry, I wish that we'd been able to do it in the last couple of years. We weren't able to, but we're going to do it now.
Let me move to some of the state plans, and I'm going to follow up where my colleague, Mr. Joyce, left off. And this is really where the rubber meets the road on my concern, and I think that of colleagues here, that have you received Texas's plan for deployment?
For the BEAD plan, yes, we have.
Okay. Can you provide me a timeline of when NTIA will approve that plan?
It's hard to comment on any particular plan in this setting. I will also say that a lot of our work depends quite a bit on the responses we get as we go back and forth with the state on particular issues. But my expectation would be that this summer is the timeline that we're looking at.
Are there biases that Mr. Joyce referenced, whether it's rate or otherwise, that are influencing the timeliness of the approval and also the approval writ large?
There are not. I think we've been just very clear with states. There's a whole lot of requirements in there. It's a lot of homework for the states, but it's $3.3 billion. And before we write a $3.3 billion check, we need to make sure that all the requirements of the law and the funding notice are met. And that's really been our focus. We have a great federal program officer based in Austin. There's a good, great state broadband office that we're working with. We're working through the issues. I haven't heard of any showstopper problems in this plan. It just takes a while to get through all the work.
Time has expired. We remain concerned about the timeliness of all of these things because it's hurting our national security. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Iowa for her first veering into this subcommittee. We're so excited to have you. Doctor, you are recognized for at least 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Weber and Ranking Member Matsui for holding this hearing today. I want to also thank our witness, Administrator Davidson, for testifying before the subcommittee. In Iowa, our households, businesses, farmers, and healthcare providers rely on affordable, secure, and accessible internet service. Increased accessibility on the internet has allowed farmers to utilize new technologies, doctors to reach patients, friends to reconnect, given our students more opportunities to learn, and workers more opportunity to live in rural America while working anywhere. Unfortunately, a large percentage of Americans in rural communities still lack access to high-speed internet, which is unacceptable. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this subcommittee to address America's broadband infrastructure in a manner that benefits all Americans, urban or rural. Administrator Davidson, precision agriculture depends on all types of connectivity. It's amazing what our farmers are doing in this space. Satellite systems like GPS, wide-range cellular connectivity, and fixed wireless access all have a part to play in ensuring that every last acre of farmland in America is connected. How are NTIA's programs supporting the precision agriculture needs of our nation's farms?
Well, thank you for the question. It's nice to see you here. I will say that when we think about our deployment, we're thinking about rural areas, we're thinking about agricultural areas, and we know that precision agriculture is a great, is kind of a killer app in a lot of ways for those communities. And so while our BEAD program is largely focused on deployment to homes and businesses, to fixed locations, we know that that will make a very big difference in these agricultural uses. I've met farmers who talked to me about how hard it is even to be able to market their goods, to get the latest information if they don't have a high-speed internet connection to their farm. And that's the kind of thing we're going to be providing. We're very focused on that.
Well, I thank you for bringing up BEAD. According to NTIA's BEAD program dashboard, as of December 27, 2023, every state submitted their initial proposals for NTIA approval. Since then, only 6 states and the District of Columbia's Volume 2 plans have been approved. And in all candor, up until a few weeks ago, only 1 state's plan was approved. The BEAD program was created as a response to the pandemic, which highlighted the urgency of the digital divide across the United States. We're soon approaching 3 years since the program was created without a single home connected yet. I urge NTIA to work faster to approve the plans and provide clear guidance to states and potential applicants so that states can proceed to the next phase, accepting applications and giving out money. To that end, in your estimation, when can the first unserved households in my district expect BEAD-funded internet service at their home? Next year, maybe, or will it be not until 2026?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I will just say we are keenly, keenly motivated to get this money out the door as quickly as we can, as wisely as we can. I'll say it's actually 7 states. Pennsylvania got approved yesterday, 7 states plus the District of Columbia. I expect that there will be a cadence now of more states regularly being approved each week. So you'll see a lot more. You're right to say that this has happened. We would like this to happen faster, but this is a long-term program. I just want to be really clear with you and really with the whole committee that we did not build the interstate highway system overnight. We did not do rural electrification overnight. This is a multi-year program. It's going to take years to connect everybody in this country. We're already doing a lot of it. We're deploying already with some of our grant programs. With BEAD, this is really a 2025, 2026 shovels in the ground project.
Well, with all due respect, Administrator,
Right.
and I'm not trying to be confrontational.
Right.
The speed of the internet and information technology is not changing at the rate at which the highway infrastructure system was built. So it is doubling exponentially, and to have a timeline that far out, there will be another new technology down the road. Meanwhile, homes are not connected. People are not accessing healthcare in rural areas. Children aren't learning, and people aren't able to live in rural areas and work from home. So can you also explain how advancements in development and deployment of AI modeling can help NTIA manage spectrum and develop new spectrum policy?
It's a great question. I've duly noted about your first point. We feel the urgency as well. On the second point, we do think that AI is going to be an incredibly promising technology for a lot of different uses, including the better use of spectrum, better management of energy usage in wireless networks. The list goes on, and it is an exciting area. I know we're at time, but one that we'd love to follow up on and talk more about because we do think it's going to provide major benefits, not just to consumers, but to businesses in our economy.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Griffith of Virginia for 5 minutes.
Hold on. We're going to actually recognize Ms. Dingle.
The chair retracts that statement. We're now going to recognize the gentlelady from Ms. Dingle for at least 5 minutes.
Sorry about that. It's one of those days for everybody in this room. And it's great to see you. So I want to say that, and we appreciate your leadership. My governor has been talking to me about this, and thank you for being here. Thanks to the chairman for holding this hearing. And I know others have raised it, but we need to fund the Affordable Connectivity Program. In Michigan, nearly 1 million households, 1 in 4 households in the state, have saved money on their internet bills because of the ACP. This program is crucial for ensuring that all Americans can participate in the digital economy, access education and healthcare resources, and stay connected. And like everybody keeps saying, we run out of money this month. Michigan is set to receive over $1.5 billion for broadband infrastructure through the BEAD program, an incredible investment in communities across the state. How will the expiration of ACP funds impact the implementation of the BEAD program in Michigan?
Thank you, Congresswoman. It's a great question, and as you said, ACP is so important for getting people being able to get online in places like Michigan, and we've heard that really affordability is so critical. 20% of the people who do not have an internet connection in this country say it's because they can't afford to get online. ACP has been a huge part of that. 23 million households, nearly 50% of them are military households, unable to get, relying on ACP, and who will have real difficulty getting online if we don't fund it. It's also related, as you know, to our ability to succeed in the BEAD program, in our deployment program, and particularly in places like Michigan, where we know that particularly in rural areas where you have a high percentage of folks who may be getting ACP and high cost to building these networks, we need to make sure there's a customer base. We need to make sure that when we build these networks, there are people who can afford to get online and use them. And without ACP, it becomes a lot harder to meet our goal of connecting everybody.
Okay, so that worries me. So beyond the BEAD program, will the end of the ACP program set Michigan back in terms of bridging the digital divide?
Well, I think it will set all of America back in reaching the digital divide. And as you note, Michigan has nearly, I think it's something like 940,000 households, maybe close to 1 million households that rely on ACP. So it will be a step back. We have been talking about the digital divide in this country for over 30 years. We finally have the resources to do something serious about it on the deployment side. We need to make sure we're addressing affordability as well.
I agree. So Michigan leads the charge in closing the digital divide with the fourth highest BEAD allocation in the country and a BEAD challenge process that's received over 480,000 submissions to verify BEAD eligible locations. Michigan wants to ensure that the infrastructure investments BEAD will make can be fully leveraged for our residents, and that this means ensuring, as we were talking about, affordability, digital skills, access to devices, and other long-term systematic barriers to digital equity. The state has proposed creating a digital inclusion fund for lasting support to address these issues beyond the BEAD's program timeframe, which I support. BEAD will work to connect underserved and underserved locations, bridging gaps left by federal programs such as the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund and Enhanced ACAM. Providers utilizing these programs must fulfill their commitments to ensure connectivity in all locations. Mr. Secretary, while NTIA is not responsible for the implementation of these programs, what is the plan for BEAD if these participants in these programs default on their obligations during BEAD's implementation?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. It's an important question. Congress has very wisely told us not to duplicate funding, to make sure that we are not funding in places where other federal programs exist. And if we're going to meet our goal of connecting everybody, it's a tough goal. We've got to make sure we're using our money smartly. The tricky part will come is if other programs that are funding deployments to locations, if people default on those. The timing will matter a lot, but I think our general rule of thumb, and we've talked to other agencies about this, is that if a provider defaults, that there will be a need to make sure those locations get served through that program in some other way. Once we start doing the BEAD deployments, the states will have locked and loaded, as it were, will be funding a set of locations in their state, and we're just going to make sure that we work really closely together with other agencies so that everybody knows what these timelines look like, and that we're all making sure that all locations that are funded actually get deployment, and that is our goal.
Thank you. I'm going to have to yield back, but Mr. Chair, I am going to have further questions on this for the record. Thank you. Yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to be rescinded this time, am I? Just teasing.
Well, stand by.
Stand by. All right. Virginia was the second state to submit their Volume 2 initial proposal. We're talking about BEAD on September 27, 2023, almost simultaneously with Louisiana, who received approval from NTIA on December 15th. Virginia is widely regarded as among the most advanced states for administering its broadband programs. So what's the problem?
Our requirement, we require that every state, when they submit their initial plan, meet the requirements of the law and of our funding notices, and when they do, we can approve them.
What
We've
did they
approved the
not
first
meet
half.
in regard to the law? Because what they got back for concerns was, and I promise you, Mr. Joyce and I, who asked you about this earlier, we did not talk about this until after he'd asked his questions, but the response back was an exact, the feedback request Virginia include one of two things in its required definition of its low-cost option in its Volume 2. An exact price for what will be the only acceptable low-cost option for BEAD-funded broadband services, regardless of provider or location in Virginia. Exact price. A formula by which one could apply and thereby derive an exact price. ... All right, tell me. If that's the problem, how are you not saying you've got to give us a price that we like, or else you're not going to be approved?
First of all, I would welcome the chance to review the communication you're talking about. I haven't seen it. I don't know it.
Right there. All right.
And
we'll
the
do that
context
after the
matters
fact.
quite a bit.
So let me ask you this.
But sure. Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. Despite the discussions that we've had today about explicit prohibition on rate regulation, it appears that NTIA has strongly encouraged states to set a $30 price cap. So on the 7 states you just told us about that have been approved in the District of Columbia, did they have a $30 price cap?
They did not.
Did they have a specific price?
Some of them had a range.
Had a range.
Yeah. So we've really accepted, I really do believe we are open to a wide variety of approaches from states. I think as approve plans, you will see that we are accepting and approving a wide variety. They do have to meet
put together a pretty
requirement.
good plan. What really is the problem if it's not this low-cost price that you all don't think is sufficient? It meets the law, it just doesn't meet your recommendation. Isn't that true?
It does not, I'd have to take a look at the
You cite me the
specifics,
section
but-
of the code, it does not.
Right. The law requires a low-cost option to be defined. And a low-cost option, in our view, it has to be an affordable low-cost option. We've been very clear, the statute's clear, our funding notice is clear. You have to be able to understand what is affordable. And many states, plenty of states have submitted, not had trouble doing this, submitted plans that actually make it understandable.
Because they've given you actual ranges of prices as opposed to a plan to get it deployed. Look, my people want to have broadband.
And we want them to.
And we'd like for it to be affordable, no question about that. And Virginia's trying to do that. And guess who the big impediment is? It's yourself. I apologize to you, but you all seem to be the problem. Virginia could have been moving already. We've lost 6 to 8 months on this.
Every state has to be able to submit a low-cost option that we can understand is affordable. When states do that, we will approve their plans. And I'm optimistic
I hear you,
that we will.
but it's not happening. Last week in a different House committee, Department of Commerce Secretary said in regards to broadband plans, quote, "What I can promise you is that we're not regulating, we are not telling any state, quote, if you don't provide it at X dollars, we're not going to give you the money. But the statute requires us to have low-cost options, so we are obviously pushing states to make sure they are providing low-cost options," which is very similar to what you are saying today, but isn't that a distinction without a difference? Aren't y'all splitting hairs in order to say we're gonna force prices, even if it's a range, we're gonna force prices, we're not gonna let you set up what works best in your state. As Mr. Joyce said, you're not allowing that great concept of the founders that the states would be the hotbed of
I said the laboratories of democracy, because I echo it, sir, because we really believe it, and you see it in these plans. There's a wide variety of approaches, and we do believe that the statute says that it has to be an affordable, low-cost option.
If you believe it and you have the power to do it, why aren't you? I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Seeing that there are no further members wishing to be recognized, I'd like to thank our witness for being here today. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list. Without objection, that will be the order. Without objection, so ordered. I remind members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses to respond to the questions as promptly as you can. And the members should submit their questions by the close of business on Wednesday, May 28th. Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned. Thank you for the help. Thank you. You betcha.